Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today is Monday the 1st of July 2024 and it is a super duper exciting day because we are going to the fertility clinic for our initial consultation. Our appointment is at 12 o'clock, so midday. We're going to leave at like 11:15. That will give us sort of half an hour to drive there, although I'm pretty sure it's only 20 minutes away. And then we'll be there 15 minutes early, so we can take a picture outside with our milestone card, because I bought a pack of IVF milestone cards from Etsy, and the next one is initial consultation. So what I'm doing now is getting ready. I feel like that's pretty obvious, Chelsea. I believe this appointment is supposed to take about an hour and a half. I think it's because obviously they haven't met us yet. They've got our fertility referral and they've got all of our results from blood tests, ultrasounds, internal exams, his semen analysis. They know what they're working with, but I think they just need to meet us in person, go through the process, discuss what the risks are, sign consent forms, and I guess just generally get an idea about our health and medical issues. Obviously, I don't know 100% what today is going to be, but that's just what my rough idea is. I've obviously done research of what the IVF process involves, including the initial consultation, and I did look on their website because there was a page on their website where they actually went through like step by step what the process was, but that just gave us an idea, but today they'll go through it in more detail, obviously. I have written down questions that we would like to ask them. And when I say we, James only had one question and I thought of all of the others. So I thought what I could do whilst I'm getting ready is tell you what questions I'm thinking about asking them. And then after, I can let you know what the answers were. So the first question that I wanted to ask was what their thoughts were on the number of follicles in my ovaries, because if you haven't watched my last video, which was the first episode in this fertility series, this is the second, I was very confused because I had an ultrasound and an internal exam in September 2021 and they counted 19. I remember her counting the number 19. Now, anything more than 12 follicles is polycystic. That is where you get your label of having polycystic ovaries. So when she was counting 19, they were obviously like, oh yeah, you have polycystic ovaries. And then when I had a ultrasound and internal exam again, a few years later, now this was in December 2023. 2023 was only last year. It was like 6 months ago, literally 6 months ago. And she counted 15 follicles in my left ovary, so that's more than 12, and then over 20 follicles in my right ovary. That is very polycystic. But the results said, conclusion, right polycystic ovary. But my left ovary had 15 follicles, and 15 is more than 12, so why was my left ovary not? And then I had another internal exam 4 days ago, and my left ovary only had 11 follicles. So in the last 6 months, I'd gone from 15 down to 11. So my left ovary was not polycystic. But my right ovary, she only counted 12 follicles. Bang on 12, which is like borderline polycystic, not excessive at all. That was her words, not mine. So how 6 months ago did my right ovary have more than 20 follicles, but now 6 months later, I only have 12. I just want to get their thoughts on that because I'm very confused. The second question I wanted to ask was, do I still need to be taking the folic acids and vitamin D, or can I stop that now? The third question I wanted to ask was, what is the sedation like on egg removal day? Because when they take my eggs out, I will not be put to sleep. I will not be put under anaesthetic, but I will be sedated, heavily sedated. I think the reason they probably won't put me to sleep is because it takes longer to recover. The fourth question I wanted to ask was, when will we know how many eggs they collected? Like, do they tell us immediately on the day, this is how many eggs we've collected today? Or do they tell us the following day? I just want to know. The fifth question I had was, are the embryos kept with them for 3 days or 5 days before they transfer into me? And the reason I'm asking that question is because somebody I know whose mum went through the IVF process, her mum was told on day 3, this is the embryo that we are going to transfer, but she paid like £200 for them to keep the embryo another 2 days to be certain. When it got to those other 2 days, so day 5, the embryo was no longer good enough to transfer. So had they have transferred that embryo on day 3, she probably wouldn't have even been pregnant. The sixth question I had was, how often will we get embryo updates? So will they be calling me every day for those 5 days or however long they end up keeping the embryos before transfer? Will they be calling me every day with an update on what has survived, what hasn't survived, and the quality, etc., etc.? Or will it be every other day? I just overthink everything and I like to have control, and at this point I don't feel like I have control because I don't actually know anything, if you know what I mean. I like just knowing things. I need to know things, and right now there are unanswered questions. It's the unknown, and I don't like the unknown. The seventh question I have for them is, can we have 2 embryos transferred? Now, I have spoken to them about this over the phone, but the person I spoke to was like the receptionist. I don't think she was actually a fertility consultant as such, but she advised that although we do get a say, at the same time they won't do anything that's unsafe. So if I was like, oh, can you transfer 3, 4 embryos, they're most likely going to be like, absolutely not. But if I asked for 2, they might consider that. I actually thought in my head, like, the more embryos you put in, the more chance you have of at least getting 1 baby out of it. And because we only get 1 round of IVF, let's make the most of that 1 round. However, the lady, again, that I spoke to on the phone, she was like, that's not actually how it works. Sometimes the more you put in, the more chance that you don't get 1. Something like that. You get the gist, I think. The 8th question that I had, which was actually the question that James thought of, was just generally, is there anything we can do to help make it work? That's it. Simple enough question. I don't need to explain that. And then the 9th and 10th question is kind of like the same, but it is, if it doesn't work, can we use a frozen embryo? Obviously, this is just hoping that we had remaining embryos that we froze. If we did have remaining embryos that we froze, and then the IVF doesn't work the first time round, we would obviously need to pay for another round. But could we use one of the frozen embryos? If so, how long do we have to wait until we can start again? And then also, how much would it cost to do another round of IVF, but with a frozen embryo? Because I am thinking in my head, I wouldn't have to inject myself with medicine every day for like 2 weeks or however long it ends up being. I won't need to do an egg collection. James won't need to do a semen analysis. They won't have to do the whole making them into embryos in the science lab because they already did that. So surely it would just be defrosting, giving me a medication to help the lining of my uterus prepare to receive an embryo, and then doing the embryo transfer. I would like to think that that's maybe between $1,000 and $2,000, but that is obviously a question that we would like to ask, because I want to feel like there is a plan B, like there's a backup plan if it doesn't work first time, because at the moment I feel like I'm kind of panicky about it not working. But at least if there was a plan B and there was a backup plan, I'd feel like I know what to do if it doesn't work, and I don't have to then overthink it too much. Does that make sense? Anyway, that is all of the 10 questions that I am going to be asking them today. And what I'll do is after the consultation, I'll let you know what the answers to those questions were. I might have questions in the consultation that I just think of on the spot, and I'll try to remember to write those down. I am actually going to be taking the notebook with me. This is what I was logging everything in for the last 8 months to film my last video, but also just to look back on if it worked or didn't work. So I'm going to be writing the answers to the questions in here, but if I do think of things on the spot in the consultation, I'll try to remember to write them down so that I can then tell you what I also asked on top of those 10. What I'm going to do now is straighten my hair. I'll do it off camera because I feel like you're probably bored out of your marbles, but I will get back to you when we are heading on our way to the consultation. See you in a bit. Hello, we are on our way to the fertility clinic to have our initial consultation. I have got my notebook and my pen so that I can write down notes and ask all of the questions that I told you about earlier. And I also bought the tripod because we need to take pictures with the next milestone card. So I made sure to bring my tripod. James is looking after that. So what I will do is I'll probably not film in there. I don't even know if we're allowed to, but I don't want to ask. I feel like this consultation is very important, so I just want to focus on that. But I will let you know after what happened.
I hate the driving.
I will let you know after how it went and what the answers to the questions were. So I will catch you in a bit. So we are back from our initial consultation at the fertility clinic, and I just wanted to let you know how the consultation went, what the answers to my questions were, and what the next steps are. I'm filming outside in the shared garden, but nobody is out here, but James is playing his Xbox and I didn't want you to hear that in the background. If you can hear some noise, it's because there's private land next to us and I think they're probably just doing some works on their land, so ignore that. So the consultation only took half an hour. We thought it was going to be like 1.5 to 2 hours because that's what I had seen online when doing research, but it only ended up taking half an hour, and I think that's because we'd already registered and signed up to their online portal beforehand. We'd signed consent forms, we'd completed a questionnaire, current health and medical history, so they already had that information. We didn't have to go into too much depth with anything. So she did go over our current health and medical history, just confirming if we drink alcohol, if we smoke, do drugs, my weight and my BMI, which is in the healthy range. She didn't ask about James's weight and BMI, but I don't think they care too much about the men's. She was asking if either of us were on any regular medication. I'm not on any regular medication. James does have regular medication, so she just wanted to know what that was and what it was for. She then told me my AMH results for Ovarian Reserve, which basically gives them an idea as to how many eggs you have, and there's nothing they can do to hocus pocus and give you more eggs. So the blood test results, which is what they did to tell them what my ovarian reserve is, how many eggs I probably have, they're looking for 6% to 70%, and I was 6.9%, so very low, and that means that I basically have a pretty low egg count. She was saying that because of my young age and that I'm pretty like fit and healthy, kind of, in her eyes anyway, the quality of my eggs should be fine, shouldn't be an issue. So it's just about the quantity, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed and everything crossed that it's gonna go okay, because I didn't know anything about this. This was the first time I'd had this blood test for the AMH. This is the first time I was hearing these results, so I have come out of the consultation feeling very worried, very concerned that I'm not going to be able to give them many eggs, and that could ultimately mean that for whatever reason we actually don't end up having a successful round of IVF, and we only get one round of IVF with the NHS funding. So I'm very worried, I'm very concerned, and I'm trying not to think too much about it because I think I might get a little upset, and I'd rather do that in my own time. She answered all of my questions, so I will do that now. There were a couple of questions that I forgot to ask, but it's not the end of the world. So I asked if I still needed to take folic acids and vitamin D. The answer was yes. James doesn't need to take anything, and I don't need to take anything else. But if we wanted to, we could. It's just that folic acids and vitamin D were the main thing. I asked why the numbers of follicles were changing. She did say that the number of follicles fluctuates every cycle. So not to dwell too much on it. She said in her opinion, she wouldn't actually say that I had polycystic ovaries. She wouldn't label me as having polycystic ovaries. She actually told us that we seem to be in the unexplained infertility subcategory, but she did also think that it could be something to do with me having a low egg count, maybe on top of the fact that I might have a polycystic ovary, kind of like everything blending in together. But she's put our cause of infertility more into like the unexplained infertility category, if that makes sense. I asked what the sedation is like on egg collection day, because I was under the impression that you're kind of loopy-loo, but you're aware. But she told me that you are actually asleep. So when you are put under general anesthetic, you can't breathe for yourself. You have like pipes up your nose or something that helps make you breathe. Whereas when you are heavily sedated, you are still asleep, but you can breathe for yourself. So it's a lower dosage compared to general anesthetic. So I will be asleep, but I'll just be breathing for myself, kind of thing. I asked when will we know how many eggs are collected, and she told me that we will know the same day that the eggs are collected as to how many that they were able to get. I asked if the embryos were kept for 3 days or 5 days, and she told me that they are kept for 5 days. I forgot to ask how often we get embryo updates. So do we get told daily how many are good quality or how many are no longer good quality? I actually forgot, but that's something I can just ask at the time. I asked if we could have 2 embryos transferred, and the answer was no. According to the NHS criteria, when you're getting NHS funding, if you have a top quality embryo, then you only get that one top quality embryo transferred. The only reason you would have 2 is if there is no top quality embryo. They then might put 2 embryos in that are obviously not as good to give you a better chance of at least getting 1. But if you have a top quality embryo, then you will only get that one top quality embryo. So having 2 is a no-no unless necessary. Our chances of conceiving with 1 is 50-50. The chances of conceiving when you have 2 embryos is 60 to 70%. So it's higher, but then the chances of the risks you can get when having twins is high. So they'd rather avoid the risk, basically. I asked what we can do to help make this work, and the answer was just to have a healthy lifestyle. Don't eat processed food. You can follow a Mediterranean diet. I don't think we would do that, to be honest. Eating fresh food, not processed, and drinking water, and just generally having a healthy lifestyle. I then asked, and this was kind of like the final question, if it doesn't work, can we use a frozen embryo if we were fortunate enough to have remaining embryos to freeze? The answer was yes. If it doesn't work, we can use one of our frozen embryos, and we would need to pay around £3,000. So this would cover defrosting, thawing the frozen embryo, any medication to kind of prepare my uterus to receive the embryo, and then the actual embryo transfer. So it'd be around £3,000, which was more than I hoped it would be. I hoped it would be sort of between 1 and 2 grand, but it's going to be more like around 3 grand. But it gives us an idea of what we could be looking at if this round doesn't work. I forgot to ask how long we would need to wait before trying again. Again, I don't need to think about that right now. So at the end of the consultation, she told us what the next steps were, and that was that we would receive a letter in the post just summarising today's consultation. I'd get a phone call from the patient support team within 1 week, confirming if there's anything else they need from me. Do they need me to do another blood test? Do they need me to do another scan? If they do, then we can get that booked in. If not, I will have an appointment booked in for me to go there and basically be shown, so learn how to administer the medication that I will need to do by injection. So I was asking about how the medication and the injections work, and what they do is they will wait for me to tell them my next cycle, day 1. So day 1 of your cycle is day 1 of your period. So as soon as my period starts, I can contact them and let them know my cycle has started. They don't actually want you to administer the medication in the first half of your cycle. they want you to do it in the next half of your cycle. So maybe 2 to 3 weeks into your cycle. So 2 to 3 weeks after you've had a period, in other words. That medication you will take for 2 to 3 weeks, and that is to stop your brain from communicating with your ovaries, because they want the brain to like cease control. They need to have control. So the medication that you're first administering for 2 to 3 weeks is to stop your brain communicating with your ovaries so that they can have control. After those 2 to 3 weeks, you will then administer a different medication for another 2 weeks, and that is to increase the number of eggs produced. So all in all, you're administering medication by injection for around 4 to 5 weeks. It does mean that we wouldn't be pregnant by when I thought. I had a timeline in my head, and I was thinking we would be pregnant by end of August, beginning of September, but now it looks more like it would be end of September, maybe beginning of October. So the timeline is different to what I thought, but this is why I shouldn't try to plan everything all the time. I like control, I like plans, and this is why I need to stop doing that, because I had a timeline in my head and now that timeline was wrong. It's actually a different timeline, and I'm probably going to get fixated on that timeline, and it could even change again. So I need to stop doing that. But anyway, that is the second episode of our fertility series finished, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Bye.